So now to our keynote. When I was first elected vice president, it was easy for me who I was going to ask to be the keynote speaker because this person is fantastic. Just a little bit about Kelly, Dr. Kelly Arispe. She graduated from University of California, Davis in 2012 and has been with Boise State since then. And there's a couple words that I would use to describe her. One is passionate about everything. Family, students. She lives on campus with 20 students in a dorm. She is passionate about colleagues and passionate about teaching and teachers. So she's going to be, we're going to have a great keynote session. So let's welcome Kelly Arispe.
Doing well? Yeah. Good. How about if you tell me good morning in your language all at once? All right? So good morning. That's a really great sound. I like to hear all these languages. It's a huge pleasure to be here. It's such an honor. I had a baby back in May, and I can sincerely tell you that I've been thinking about this presentation at all hours of the night, early in the morning. It's actually a really good space to be able to think through this, try to be purposeful in what I could bring to the table today in this hour and a half that we have together. I'm going to make this presentation interactive. There are things on your table. I'll explain those in just a second. Just to introduce myself again, my name is Kelly. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of World Languages here at Boise State. It's awesome to have you here at our university. Welcome. My bread and butter, if you will, is second language acquisition. So I'm a Spanish linguist. I got my PhD at UC Davis. My heart is for teaching. I love that my research and my teaching go hand in hand. I feel that they feed one another, and it's really exciting to be here in front of you and hopefully share some things that have inspired me to inform my practice. I love that I get to be a learner all the time, right? As teachers, we're constantly learning, constantly adapting, trying to be better. And that's what I'm about. That's what this presentation is about. And I appreciate you all here. You're on the front lines. This is a presentation that, this is a conference I look forward to every year. I feel that there's a real sense of urgency for why we meet. We meet to encourage one another, to inform our practice, to sharpen what we do in the classroom, to share what works well and maybe what doesn't. And so that's what I'm excited about this morning. I'm stealing the actual title, as you can tell here, as well as our title from the conference, so Inspire, Engage, Transform. I hope to convey to you today what I see, which is consistency and commitment when we talk about the 5 C's, but much, much beyond that. What does ACTFL bring, and how are they consistent in their message, not just in their vision? Some preliminary details you'll see on the table in front of you. There are 2 main things. Don't touch the second, wait for it. Those are the word clouds. That'll be our interactive activity. I know some of you are trying to maybe anticipate what it's about, but we'll get there, I promise. There is a half sheet there, though it's in that Boise State blue. And you can see that if you have the QR code scanner, you can scan that. I'm sharing a Dropbox folder with you with loads of information and loads of materials, hopefully some very practical things that you can take and start implementing on Monday, if you will, if you're so inspired. I'll be sleepy this weekend, but so that's there for you. And I wanted to give you an outline so you know where I'm going with this presentation before we begin. The first thing is I'm hoping that we can inspire one another and reflect about why we're here. I want to then engage you in this presentation by talking to you and reminding you about the communicative approach. A lot of you have taken a workshop with me or been in presentations where several of us from Boise State or you yourselves have talked about what the communicative approach is, why we feel that it matters, why it's contemporary with loads of research on second language acquisition. I'm going to talk about specifically aligning classroom practice with assessment, something that I'm very, very passionate about. And that's been something that's arisen in me since I've been at Boise State. And I'll explain why and share a little bit about that and why I'm so passionate about those 2. I am going to talk to you, of course, about ACTFL 5 C's and proficiency guidelines. And I'm going to present some research that I think is really convincing about why it matters to look at the 5 C's and these proficiency guidelines. I'm going to talk to you about how much time it should take to actually get at a certain proficiency level. That's stuff that maybe we're not really aware of, but it's really important. I'm going to talk to you about realistic expectations K through 16. So I obviously teach college students. It's a different game, quite obviously, than K through 12. So I'm going to talk about the different levels and some of the different challenges according to what age range you're teaching. Hopefully, the goal is to transform our practice, right? Transform the way we assess, and I believe we can do that in application through can-do statements that ACWA provides. I'm going to be talking to you about that too. Of course, I like technology a lot. It has its weaknesses. This morning, as I was preparing for this conference and trying to load my presentation onto my computer, no problem yesterday, it decided not to work, which is why I'm using the iPad, and which is why I'm very, very thankful that I have Amber. So technology does have its issues, but I really believe that there are technologies that can actually really support what students are doing so that it is learner-centered. I'll talk about that. I have 2 specific assessments that are in that shared Dropbox folder that guide you through sample activities that you could do in your classroom. Okay, so we'll get there. Those examples, one's a writing proficiency example, and then another one is a speaking example. Sound good? You ready? Okay, cool. First, I want you to tell me what you know. All right, so I want you to pull out some smart device. If you have an old phone, that's okay. We still support that. You can text on those, what do they call them, dumb phones? Believe it or not, the freshmen that I live with, 2 of them don't have smartphones. So maybe it's, coming back, this, stand against the technology, I don't know. But okay, so you can go either on your web browser, in your smartphone, tablet, or your computer. So you go to poleverywhere.com/Kelly Arispe 141, or you can go here and text this. And it only allows for 40 responses, so not everybody has to do it, but it'll give us an understanding. All right, so you should, as you're logging in, you should see, I'll show you here. Is everybody logging in there? Wi-Fi giving you problems? Most everybody in? No? Okay. Don't overthink it. It's not a test, and it's very anonymous. I won't judge you, okay? So, all right. So I can name the 5 C's. I recite them daily. Or does it really mean chocolate, cupcake, cookie, candy, coffee? I live with a 3-year-old. I need all of these, okay? All right, so great. Advance the next one. Everybody respond? Let's see here. No sweat. That's awesome. Okay, uh-oh. It's growing. It's growing. No. You can see how fun. This is a great tool for class to use with students as a warm-up to kind of get a feel for what they know coming into class, right? So I'm hopefully modeling to you technology that might work well in your classroom. I know a lot of you have probably used this. All right, let's check out, okay, uh-oh. I should leave before that answer, the no column, starts growing. What about familiarity with actual proficiency guidelines? Remember, your answers are anonymous. Tell me what you really know. Are you all starting to really be doubting? Kind of fun. All right. Okay. Obviously, this is giving me a baseline for what to assume, right? So this could be modeled in your classroom. Do you know how to conjugate the verb in the present tense, right? Yes or no? Get a really good feel quickly to know what you can kind of assume and move on, or what you need to review. Okay, so let's the last one here. I know how to use the can-do statements. True, I can do. False, no can do. Tell me what you know. Good. This is great. Well, okay. Kind of fun. All right, I'm going to return now to the presentation here. Do I play it from my iPad or from the computer?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter? All right, thank you for that. So let's inspire. I want to give you 2 reflection questions, and there's going to be maybe an awkward moment of silence, but that's okay. I'm okay with awkward. I want you to think about, you might even jot this down on a piece of paper, whatever you're comfortable with. I want this to be our starting point for today. Ready? Are you ready? Or just thinking, or write it, whatever you want. Okay, awesome. Why are we here today? Is the first question. Why are you here? Why did you come to this talk? Why did you come to this conference, right? And why does what you do matter? Existential questions merit more coffee, so if you need to go get more coffee at 9 a.m., I totally understand. But why are you here today, and why does what we do matter? Think about that for 1 minute. Why are you here, and why does what you do matter? All right. The reason I'm here today has a lot to do with these faces. This is Trish Pinker-Brainer. She's about to get her master's in bilingual education shortly thereafter and finish up her endorsement in Spanish and hopefully get a job at one of your schools, because she's awesome. She's why I'm here. This is Chris Moriarty. He graduated last spring from our Spanish department. He's going to go on to the Coast Guard. Chris was an amazing student. You might be thinking, oh, Spanish, what does that have to do with the Coast Guard, right? That doesn't directly relate. It relates a lot. Because what we do in Language Classroom supersedes just teaching the language. It teaches our students how to communicate, how to anticipate somebody who doesn't maybe speak English as a first language. It gives them a fantastic resource to be able to serve the growing Latino population in the U.S. So what he does matters. And what I do in my classroom day to day inspires what he does. It matters because Marilyn Custer, excuse me, I always pronounce last names as if they were in Spanish. Marilyn Custer is working on her master's in linguistics at the Linguistics Institute in Toronto, Canada. She's currently studying Thai to understand how linguistic systems are built so that she can provide literacy development in West Africa. I'm here today because of students like Lihana. This isn't actually her picture, and this actually isn't her name, but she gave me permission to talk about her. She's a student I had in graduate school, took both beginner and intermediate Spanish with me. She's multilingual, speaks Punjabi, Urdu, Hindi, Spanish, and English. And she's currently serving in the CIA, hopes to be an ambassador for the U.S. someday. You never know, right? You never know what our students are going to be able to go on and do. I never thought having her, teaching her verb conjugations, that could be an aspect of what she would bring to the table someday. Scott Watford, one of our favorite students, right? So, shining student, now in your schools, affecting young people, teaching them something about running too, I'm told, right? Okay. What's great about Scott wasn't wasn't just his love for Spanish, but why he wanted to use it, right? To be able to serve people in this community, in this Treasure Valley, and to teach students how to serve those people. His inspiration was, who?
My high school Spanish teacher.
Your high school Spanish teacher. So what you do matters. On the day-to-day, verb conjugations, vocabulary, wanting to throw an eraser at somebody because they didn't do their homework for the 50th time, they have a negative attitude, those things often discourage us. But the long run really matters. These spaces matter to me because they're also personal. This is my grandmother. Her name was Eva Camacho Tato. Her mother was from Sonora, Mexico, an indigenous village in Banamichi. Her father was from the Azores. Fatima, where you are, Virtual. But in California in the 30s, in San Jose, California, it wasn't very popular to speak Spanish or Portuguese. And so I'm the only person in our very large family that actually speaks Spanish. For me, growing up, being in high school, I realized that learning Spanish was far beyond just being able to travel. It was a way to connect to my heritage. It's a way to leave a legacy. What I do matters because this is your future, and it's personal to me. These are my children. This is Santiago, who's 3. This is Joaquin, who's 4 months. Not only are they cute, but they're going to be the faces in your classroom, right? They're the students that are going to be trying to understand how to use Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, whatever language they choose to study. And we need to make sure that our job and what we're doing is current with best practices, that we're giving them access to the world, and we're presenting culture in a way that inspires them to go beyond what they might think this language is really supposed to be used for, right? Ultimately, learning language is learning culture. It's deeply personal. It can't be abstracted from our identity, whether that reflects our heritage or an emerging second identity. Language is intrinsically part of our humanity, and what we do day to day, what you do matters. It matters because these faces fill my classroom, but they most likely probably started in yours. You had an impact, you have an impact, and I believe that's why we're here today. So let's engage. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone a little bit about about things that I've talked about in previous presentations. I want to be clear about my assumptions today. It's important to lay that foundation so that what I'm talking about isn't disconnected from the theory, isn't disconnected from the approach that I'm hoping we're all, that we all subscribe to. So I want to talk about the communicative classroom. I fully respect that every classroom, every teacher should have autonomy to make their classroom look different. You have that power, you have that right. But I do think that if we look at research, if we look at people in the field trying to inform classroom practice, we're all on the same page that communicative is probably best. What does communicative classroom look like? Well, we have this expression that's coined in the 1970s by Del Hines, who wanted to get at the fact that the way languages had been being taught, think about Latin, sorry Karen if you're here, all due respect, I'm sorry, you do a fantastic job, but the way Latin, Greek, and Hebrew were taught through the grammar translation method as a way to be able to read literature, probably not the way we want to be teaching our students to use the language for real purposes, right? So he coins this term and he calls it communicative competence. And it's from that expression that we have the communicative approach. It's from that understanding. And this is not something simple, right? Knowing how, when, and why to say what to whom. Not only is it difficult to say, right? But it's very difficult to actually scaffold our students into being able to do that. The communicative classroom also uses one of Crashen's metaphors as comprehensible input. So this idea of I+1. How many of you have heard of this? Okay, good. So obviously this means that we don't go into a classroom and we don't speak beyond the scope of our learners. We're very aware of what their proficiency level is, and we go just beyond that to provide them a pedagogical scaffold, right? That's one of his metaphors. I think, though, that's probably more important, even than comprehensible input, is comprehensible output. Meryl Swain coins this term in the 80s, and she does this to give life to the natural approach, which has some issues, okay? Comprehensible output, she says, is negotiated through meaning. So we need students not only to be able to comprehend the message, but to be able to use the message in actual spontaneous manner. And the way they do that is by exercising that muscle, right? And we do that through activities where students are forced to realize, oh, in my head I understood that perfectly, but when I actually tried to use that sentence, it didn't come out perfectly. And the fact that you have a really inquisitive look means that I didn't say it right and I need to try again. And that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. Repetition, recast, those things, those interactions are real. Think about how many times in your first language you do that all the time. My husband and I do that all the time, but that might be a different issue. So, let's see here. Also, really important and really intrinsic as far as the communicative approach goes is learner-centered. I'm not the sage on the stage. This is not a performance. My goal is to think about my classroom very, very specifically, and strategically, so that my students, when they come to class, they're the ones exercising the muscle, not me, right? And that takes a lot of preparation, a lot of work. I also think that authentic texts are best, right? Text I'm using very generally, very categorically. That can be a YouTube video, right? It could be a commercial. I love using commercials, actually. They're short, they're authentic. Steal on YouTube, right? Authentic commercials. Give access to your students to hear the language, not just in the Spanish variety from Spain, but Mexico and Central America, right? Give them as much opportunity to connect with the language from other sources. In addition to authentic text, I believe that task-based and project-based activities motivate our learners. It gives them agency, it empowers them to choose things that are motivating for them. Give them options. That's all part of learner autonomy, which we know are general educational practices that are very good. The buzzword right now. One thing that I think often gets overlooked in the communicative approach that I feel sociocultural, Vygotsky types of approaches have done a really good thing, is to remind us that language can never be divorced from culture. When we do that, we do a disservice to our students. You may think that it's really mundane to explain grammar and that what does that have to do with culture? It has a lot to do with culture. It's about how you frame that, right? How can you show that a noun can also be an adjective and can also have and is also linked associated with this verb conjugation. Show a picture of how that word's actually used in the culture. If you want a good model of this, sorry Fatima, I'm throwing you under the bus here, but she came into my methods course, which I teach for our French, Spanish, and German secondary ed students here, did a phenomenal job doing a 101 second or third day presentation all in Portuguese. None of my students spoke Portuguese. Claudia, were you in that class? I think you were. Yeah, Claudia was in that class. And she had those students using numbers, letters, and colors in 15 minutes and talking about the flag, talking about a map in Portugal, relating language the second day, right? Second day class typical for her, but the first 15 minutes with my students, they were able to do that. They were able to do something that was culturally relevant. So that's what I'm talking about language culture. Every time that we teach language, we're reflecting the culture. So I think when we talk about classroom practice, if we have those things at the forefront, if we're kind of all on the same page that, yeah, that sounds good, that's at the heart of what we're doing, I think our classroom practice is going in the right direction. What concerns me and why I was excited to talk to you about today is really, it has to do with assessments. Because I feel that there is often this disconnect between what we practice and then what we evaluate from our students. Let me give you an example. I like to run. I decided in 2009, in the middle of graduate school, that it would be a really great idea to train for a marathon. Okay, and I was living in Davis, California at the time, which Davis has cows, tomatoes, and the university. It's very flat, okay? It's like a farmland, right? And that didn't seem like a problem because, as you can see from this really nice graphic, the California International Marathon that I had signed up for was the fastest race in the country. It was all downhill, pun intended, okay? So the only problem with that is that there's this thing called net downhill. I learned a lot about what that word net downhill means with running because the race actually wasn't just all downhill. It had a lot of peaks amongst those valleys, okay? And so I thought it would be really cool to find find a Google image of me running as I'm crossing the finish line to say that I made it. Unfortunately, what I found online was this picture. And I really do think that this picture was right at about mile 12 when I saw my husband on the sidelines and I was pleading with him for more Advil. What does this have to do with assessments? What does this have to do with the presentation? Sometimes I think we set our students up in this way. We tell them it's all downhill. This is what we're all about, communicative approach. And then we give them an exam, and it takes them all the way back to the grammar translation method with fill in the blanks, memorized expressions. We're not testing them, we're not evaluating them in the same way, in the same manner that we're leading them in class in the day-to-day, and that matters to me. And I think that the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, that's what the ACTFL abbreviation means, those of you that were wondering, I think they have something to say about aligning assessments to classroom practice. So let's talk about the 5 C's. Have you seen this? I always want to start running like I'm an Olympian, right? You've got the rings? Okay. The best way to understand the 5 C's is to start with communication, and then I'm going to work clockwise, okay? All right. ACTFL thinks it's a good idea to be able to communicate. I think it's a good idea to be able to communicate, right? In the second language. To be able to communicate both through writing as well as through speech, so both modes. And when we can communicate, we can better understand different cultures. So moving to the next ring, right? So being able to communicate allows us to have access to different cultures. When we have access to different cultures, we're able to make connections across disciplines, right? To English, to Spanish, to science. What do those things have to do with what I'm learning as a result of being able to speak? Ethoscopy gave a great presentation yesterday about things she's doing with grammar. She has them going out and reading about environmental issues. Now that's an advanced course. I understand that a lot of us don't teach advanced level language, but that's an excellent way to get at this connections piece. Once you have communication and you're navigating different cultures and you're able to make connections, you're able to make comparisons between your L1, your first language, and the L2, L3, L4, your other languages that come after that. And when you can make comparisons, you can then participate in communities, whether or not that's local communities or communities abroad. Okay, so that's the goal of the 5 C's. Essentially, it provides vision, it provides foundation, inspiration, and there are standards. So most of us are familiar, hopefully, especially as educators, since that's how we're accredited, is to be able to understand these standards, understand that this is a pretty good goal, right? But what I'm interested in are specifics, details, how-to, application, and action. Are you interested in that? I want to go beyond standards. The thing is that ACTFL does that. They essentially have, I love this smitten pigeon, okay? They essentially have a recipe, thousands of recipes, for you to get at that final product. It's all there for you, and it's all in that shared Dropbox folder, too, okay? That we'll look at in just a minute. Let me put it a different way. Nice house, right? I would love to be able to have a Spanish style house like this. Looks beautiful. You look at the house and you say, that's my dream house. That's like the 5 C's. Those are the standards. That's a vision. That's a goal. We want that. We're about that. I don't think anybody's disputing that vision, right? The problem is that in order to get at that house, you have to have a blueprint, right? You have to know what the characteristics of the house are. I think that's a lot like the proficiency guidelines. I think the proficiency guidelines outline at any certain level, any different room, this is what it's going to look like, and these are the characteristics you need to get at the whole package, right? But the problem is that a blueprint doesn't build a house, and a picture of a house isn't a house. It's just a dream. It's just a vision. The mortar, right? The nails, the materials, the day in, day out, sweat, blood, and tears, the stuff that you guys are doing in your classes, I believe ACTFL provides pathways to that through the can-do statements, and we're going to look at those today. It gives you a framework, it gives you the materials to build real assessments and classroom practice that can eventually get your students on the right track to be able to embody their dream house. And that's why I see consistency and commitment from ACTFL. It's not a group of people trying to make a lot of money. They do that, obviously. They're business. But I do think it started with sincere educators, people that have their PhDs and devoted their lives to understanding what second language acquisition should look like, does look like, and trying to mitigate concerns that you all have on the ground, right? You're the ones on the front lines. You're the ones that are doing the hard work. They're trying to support you in that, and there are a lot of wonderful tools online free for you to access. Essentially, what gets me excited and why I'm passionate and why the deeper I dive into my research and my classroom practice, I'm convinced that ACTFL provides assessments that align to classroom practice. And I can stand before you today, and I can say that I believe in this. I wouldn't do that if I didn't, right? So that's where we're going. So let's talk about what proficiency is, okay? ACTFL defines proficiency, which is the goal. There's a difference between proficiency, fluency, and accuracy. Fluency and accuracy are part of proficiency, but that is a very limited perspective of language. Proficiency is the goal. I do not expect accuracy and fluency from a novice or intermediate speaker. They're working on those things. I expect proficiency that's at the right range, at the right level for them. That's what we do, right? They define proficiency as the ability to use language in real-world situations, in spontaneous interaction, and non-rehearsed context, and in a manner acceptable and appropriate to native speakers of the language. I might add here that they don't expect you to be teaching and creating native speakers. Your students will never be native speakers unless you're teaching heritage or native speakers themselves. The goal isn't to make them little parrots of native speakers, but to give them the tools to approximate and navigate native context. Does that make sense? There's a big difference in that. You might think by looking at this statement, well, geez, we should just stop teaching and just fund everybody to go live in Mexico or go live in Spain because this isn't real for the classroom context, right? Do you feel that way? Do you think, how in the world can we get at this? When my goal, my job is to walk them through the chapter, have them memorize vocabulary, have them memorize grammar. The thing about this is that I think that proficiency may not crutch on classroom context. You could probably argue that you could take a 15-year-old, throw them in Germany, and say, I'll see you in 4 years, and you'll be proficient. You could probably say that, right? We would all agree. That's happened to some of us. But I think for the general majority, most often and most likely, those students are dependent on what we do with them to get proficient. They're dependent upon that classroom setting. So we need to understand what proficiency guidelines are. How many of you have seen the inverted pyramid? How many of you teach novice students? So like first year. Okay, awesome. Do you ever feel that students are they're learning all this stuff and they're just doing so great and they're super excited? How many of you teach intermediate students? I like to call this purgatory, okay? If you get to intermediate, the reason why it feels like purgatory is if you look at the inverted pyramid, how much do they have to climb? How much do they have to dominate for them to feel that they're in the intermediate? Very little compared to purgatory. And Scott, you can't answer, and those that have gone through the training can't answer, but what do you think is the hardest step to climb? What sub-level here? What do you think is the bridge where students often give up? Where they say, I just can't do this thing?
Intermediate high.
Intermediate high. Anybody else? Got it, right. Perfect. What's your name?
It's Ben.
Ben. Good job, Ben. Okay, awesome. If I had like a piece of candy, I need to take Oscar's candy bag. Throw some candy at you. So, yeah, intermediate high is the hardest barrier. Guess what? Intermediate high is supposedly where your graduating seniors are supposed to be. So they come and take a college class at BSU and they go, I took 4 years in high school and here I am back in 101, 102, I just can't do this thing, and they give up. What they don't know, and maybe I think we need to do a better job, and this is part of why I'm here today, is to make this explicit and say, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing right now. Hang in there, right? So this is the inverted pyramid. Now I want you to play with the descriptors, and that's what the activity on the table is. So I'm going to explain this right now. There should be 2 packets on each table. These are word clouds. They're not as beautiful as they would be if they were on the iPad. Some of them got cut off, so my apologies. but I want you to read through the different characteristics. I strategically pull these words from these proficiency levels. So you need to match a word cloud with one of these levels. The goal of this activity is for you to think, you can write on top, circle, underline. I want your feedback. What's surprising from these proficiency levels? Okay? You understand? Ready, set, go. Okay, so thanks to Barrett Norman over here, one of the professors in German, she gave me candy. Okay, so somebody, I know, thank you Barrett, I appreciate it. So the black sheet. What do you think the black sheet, what level does that associate with? Which black sheet? Sorry. The black with the red writing. This says linguistic ease. Yes, you.
Advanced high.
Good job. Sorry. Okay. Advanced high. Good job. So let's look at this. Linguistic ease. Pattern of error, but where? At abstraction. Okay. What stands somebody out from superior to advanced high is being able to not have patterns of error at the abstract level. It's very difficult to do. We can often talk about ourselves really well, but when we try to talk abstractly about what will happen in the future or this phenomenon happening, making comparisons, doing that without a pattern of error is difficult. Even for native speakers. I've had a lot of native speakers that don't get into the superior level. It's very common. Competence, illustration, confidence, precise intonation, so being able to use pragmatics about the language, paraphrasing, precise vocabulary, circumlocution. We often think that when students in our class don't know a word and then they get at it by a roundabout way, that's a problem. That's actually that's a characteristic of advanced high. That's awesome. That happens all the time. I say a word to my husband, he has no idea what I'm, well, it's like this. We speak in metaphors. Langhoff writes a really good book. Has anybody read The Metaphors We Live By? If you like linguistic theory, it's a great book. Okay. So structured argument, construct hypotheses, detailed and accurate narration. All right, what about the blue one? The Boise blue one. What level do you think that is?
The next one, high.
Mercedes. Which one? Intermediate high. Okay, so can you pass the cake? What are these, by the way? Chewy candy. Okay. Sounds good. Oh, I'm sorry. It's advanced low, not intermediate high. My apologies. My apologies. Give the cake back. Don't write. Okay. What's surprising about this level? When you read advanced low, what's something that stands out to you about this description? Grammatical roughness can still be a quality of advanced. That is why sometimes our over expectation for accuracy, we need to be a little bit more forgiving sometimes. You can still be advanced and have grammatical roughness.
What's in us there?
Native speaker. Understood by native speaker. But thank you for that. That's important. An advanced speaker could be plopped in the middle of nowhere and needs to be understood by a native speaker. Okay, that means that they're not a teacher. They can't anticipate what the first language is and say, oh, you're trying to say this, right? They're true native speakers. If you were to find un abuelo, a grandpa, like a little old sweet man, and sit on the bench with them and start talking, he would need to be able to follow you without having the skills of a teacher to be able to put in the gaps. Anything else that surprises you by this description for being characterized advanced? Irregular flow, absolutely. We can anticipate with an advanced low speaker that they'll be able to dominate the personal stories very, very well. Okay? That they'll be, when things that they're excited about a pastime, a hobby, they're going to be able to have confident speech. But maybe when they describe their job for the first time in Spanish or German, the breaks. That's okay to have ebbs and flows in the flow, okay? What's important about an advanced level speaker is being able to narrate stories in past, present, and future. That is very important. It's a quality of advanced. All right, so then you know, oh, well, what's intermediate high? Excuse me. Which color do you think is intermediate high?
I have one.
Sure. Wait,
question about this.
question, yes.
When it says some current events, is
Some
that,
current
is that
events.
just limited by specific vocabulary or?
No, that
Or
what that
some be
means,
easier than others?
thank you for the question. That's really important. This is why culture, lingua culture, the concept of culture is so important in our classroom. Our students need to know something about what's going on. What's happening in Spain right now, in Catalonia? That's important. That's something that maybe if you're teaching a Spanish culture in civ class, you should interrupt class to talk about. You should give them access to that type of information. It can be highly individualized. So in an oral proficiency interview, if somebody tells me they studied abroad in Costa Rica, I might ask them and I might say, hey, talk to me about a couple current events that are going on in Costa Rica right now. It's the ability to get outside of yourself and be able to speak, right? That's like those passive or the, to be able to use certain structures and to say, in this society, this is what's going on. So it's not always related to the personal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but that's where culture, right? That's where being up to date on what's happening in the countries where we speak this language is really important. All right, intermediate high, I heard white. Who said that first? You guys? Okay. Good job. All right, so intermediate high. Okay.
Yeah, got it.
What's here that's different about advanced low?
Mostly paragraph.
Sorry, somebody said something? Yes, what'd you say?
Mostly paragraph length. Doesn't connect to the paragraph.
Thank you. Very, very important. So mostly paragraph length at intermediate high. The difference is that advanced low is connected. You feel that it's as if somebody, and this is a really important communicative strategy in our first language, it's something that high schoolers are still adapting on in their first language, which makes this very difficult for them to do. In college, we hope it's a little bit more put together. Still, sometimes it's not. Being able to think about an idea and before speaking, being able to organize it in a manner that the interlocutor can follow well. So it's like as if you were to write a paper, you would have transitions, connectors, guiding them to that message. To be able to have a little bit of that show up in your actual speech. Very difficult to do. Other things that are surprising about intermediate high here? Nothing?
Code switching.
Code switching. Yeah, what is code switching? Code switching. What's code switching, Scott
As you
Watford?
stare at me,
What?
as you stare at me, you should have
Yes, he took my class. He should know this information. What is code switching?
switching between two languages.
Yeah, and it can be done at the clause level, or it can actually be done inner clause, which is very difficult. That's a high bilingual can do that. I'm sure Claudia can probably do that, right? And so, yeah, code switching probably for our learners might be something where they interject a word in English, or they interject a structure from your first language into what should be a structure from their second. So that's common. That's okay to possess at intermediate high. All right. Okay. So what about intermediate low? As we're narrowing it down. What about here? Did somebody get intermediate low? I'm sorry, I jumped. Okay. What you guys got intermediate low? Tell me what's. Wait, I already need it. Who needs a pen? Who needs a picture right now? Okay, all right. You guys got intermediate low? All right. What's interesting? What sticks out to you about intermediate low? This is important because of the data I'm going to present. Focus on intermediate low. Karen.
It's the daily tasks, being able to order food. You can start functioning in language, but not completely.
Absolutely, absolutely. Daily tasks are really important. How many of you think that when you're teaching the reflexive verbs in Spanish, I'm sorry, that's my language, so I can always go back to that, but when you're teaching the roads, in the morning I do this, that's just sometimes boring. It's really important. Actually being able to talk about your schedule is a marker for me when somebody, that's the first thing when I have somebody come and do an OPI, which I'll talk about. I ask them, talk to me about your day from when you get up to when you go to sleep at night. Funny, advanced learners, sometimes they forget, right? They forget, I did that in 102, I don't remember. It's an important thing to be able to talk about the ins and outs of your day. What other things are surprising about intermediate low? Maybe not surprising, what's important, yeah.
To me, it's always a shock to look at the difference between intermediate low and intermediate high. It's huge.
And this again is why if you are teaching intermediate, so if you're teaching intermediate college level, if you're teaching 3rd and 4th years high school, your students you'll see with the data, they're at intermediate low. Novice high, intermediate low. If you feel discouraged, if you feel like things that you're teaching, they're taking 1 foot forward and then 5 steps back, it's because they're in purgatory. They're in the intermediate level. They need to just, sorry, but that's honestly how I'm not even Catholic. But anyway, that's how you need to think about this as this space where it's muddy, it's messy. But the more you provide them opportunities to negotiate meaning, the more that your classroom is learner-centered, the more opportunities they have to actually get to that intermediate high level, right? Intermediate high is marked by spontaneous speech. They can't anticipate it. It's not a fill in the blank, right? So it's really important to practice that. Now, a lot of you probably got, this is the easiest one, right? Novice mid. I've got one more. Who wants candy? You want a candy, Ben?
Sure.
All right. Isolated words, memorized phrases, silence. Get a lot of that? Okay. Frequent pauses, minimal communication, simple vocabulary, difficulty to understand, L1 interference. Okay? A lot of you are teaching students that are dealing with this, and it's very frustrating for you, it's very frustrating for them. Doesn't mean that it can't be fun, doesn't mean that they can't move beyond that level, but it's a reality that they might only have 25 real words, right, in their second language. That's okay. That's the starting point. All right, so we kind of already talked about thoughts and reactions. Now I want you to think, and I kind of shared with that already, but think about the classes you teach, and think and write down for me on piece of paper on the back of one of those, what proficiency level do you think should be appropriate at the beginning and at the end of the class you teach? For those of you that are K through 12, this should be over a year. So when they come in August and when they leave in May, what are the proficiency levels that they should be at? For those of you that teach at college, we think of it in the semester. Semester should be equivalent to a year for secondary. Okay? What do you think?
They go from nada to intermediate.
Finished too.
All right, you got it written down?
Totally depends on. I guess I'll make like a math.
This is where I get really excited in the presentation, okay? I like data.
Yeah. Kids better warm up because they want to get.
You guys ready? I'm going to present to you a study from high school, a study that's done, not from high school, sorry, a study that's done about secondary students, and then a study that's done post-secondary to show you what should be expected for proficiency level and the importance of time. So, I think that second language acquisition research has a lot to say about this subject and should be informing our practice. There was a mega study that was done with 7,500 students, okay, across 117 schools, 56 districts, and 21 states at the 9 through 12 secondary level. I'm going to show you a graph on the next slide. It's important to remember the proficiency levels, 1 through 6, 1 being novice low, 2 novice mid, 3 novice high, intermediate low, intermediate low 4, intermediate mid 5, and intermediate high 6. Okay? So have those in mind. When they looked at proficiency for reading, writing, and speaking, what they found was that in reading, students that took a foreign language, and this is for group 1 languages, that means, and they include in this Russian, German, French, Spanish, Portuguese, all the Romance languages. Category 2 languages would be Arabic, Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. Those languages usually are a sub-level, if not 2 sub-levels behind for obvious reasons, right? Okay, so looking at this for the majority of our languages, what they found is that students, their reading proficiency, what could be expected, was novice mid to intermediate low after 4 years. Writing, what could be expected was intermediate low and mid. What is most alarming to me is when it comes to speaking. 4 years of high school Spanish, for example, gets you at a low mid range. I've heard so many students when they come to our program at BSU talk about their experience in high school as if it was a waste. All I can do is talk about my daily activities. All I can do is talk about my pastimes. I didn't learn anything. They're wrong. But you know where we're wrong? By not making this explicit to them. Because there is a cultural idea that if you just take 4 years in high school, you should be fluent. You should be proficient with the language. That goes against so much research. 720 hours is the buzzword. I want you to remember that number. And it's different for those that are starting in high school and different than those that are starting in college. 720 hours of college level instruction is what gets you to advanced. What's the problem with that? At BSU, we work so hard at giving a communicative approach to our students. We have 320 hours at best with them. At best. Okay? That's where study abroad is so important. That's where you have to talk about to your students about the value of being immersed in that language. It gets them those other hours that are missing here. High school instruction can lead to intermediate, mid at best, according to this study. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Let's look at time. I pulled this from the actual proficiency guidelines that are in your shared Dropbox folder. You can look at this, you can read the context. This for me is convincing data that students need to start early. We all know that. We're all supportive of that. This is evidence you can take to your district about the value of starting Spanish, German, French, whatever language it is, early. Right? If you look at the difference, so students are only taking 2 years in high school, they're going to get to the novice. That's it. Right? Parents say, oh, they're taking 2 years of German. What's wrong? They're not studying or that teacher's not doing a good job. Show them this chart. Why aren't you showing them this chart? Print this chart and give this to them at parent-teacher conference. Show them this is data. We're doing our job. But you can't expect to run a marathon by running 5 miles in your practice, right? You need to be able to have time on task. The value of this, look at the K through 16. This is my hope for my son, right? This is why I'm so adamant about trying to get him eventually into a dual immersion program. I know this. If he has any hope of being a high advanced superior speaker, it has to start when he's young. It doesn't mean that people that start at high school, I started in junior high, right? You can make up for that. But I also went to grad school for a long time, right? I also had a lot of practice debating, arguing, speaking, doing lots of fun things in the target language. Let's look at oral proficiency at the university level, okay? So this is really interesting data. Swender, she's actually the director of the oral proficiency exam. If you went to ACTFL, you would be able to see her there. She's great. She did this study on 501 foreign language majors across states. And what she found is that only 47% of graduating foreign language majors actually reach the advanced level. Half, less than half. Okay, so let me say that again. Less than half of graduating foreign language majors reach the advanced level. Time on task, 320 hours is not enough. They have to start with you guys. You have to keep your students learning language. What you do matters. Matters for them to get those extra 2 years in high school that may not be required. Yeah.
Are the missionaries coming from different countries included in this 47%, or it is just students that start with zero knowledge?
Thank you for that question. She excluded the native speakers and the heritage language speakers, and she's just looking at the true second language learner. So somebody starting from zero. So without coming from a different country, which I feel is pretty accurate and pretty fair, especially for the state of Idaho, right? Looking at teacher candidates, people that go on to be teachers, 52% of them reach the advanced level. Do you know that ACTFL teams up with CAPE and that 21 states in our country use oral proficiency interviews to be endorsed? Idaho is not one of them. I think we should change that. You want to know why? BSU. I'm pretty excited about this, you guys, and you're a part of this. We've been collecting data and doing oral proficiency interviews with our Spanish majors, 82% of them have reached the advanced level. 82% of that, and I've got an asterisk there, there are some caveats. We're trying to work on getting some longitudinal data and some comparative data. So when they enter into our program and leave, what's the jump, right? But just looking at the data, and I would add that they're not just getting at advanced low, they're getting at advanced mid, advanced high, some superior.
And there again, you are just talking about true second language.
No, there I'm looking at, there I'm looking at. But I would say though, I was looking at the data and I was looking at those that are true secondary language, second language learners. There are a solid half of those. I mean, they are getting an advanced range. So what you're doing with those students in your high schools is very, very vital. It's very important. They come on to take classes with us, and we're continuing that. And they're going to study abroad. They're working in internships with teachers. Ithassan's class, they're going to the jails. They're talking and translating letters. They're doing real work. They're getting at the 5 C's, and they're getting to the proficiency level, okay? It's really important, yeah.
So these 82% advanced level are students that have taken 320 hours of foreign language.
And more. They've studied abroad. They might be heritage language learners. So, and that's the data that we haven't teased out, because you can imagine with 50, that's not a large enough sample size to be able to say that it's this definitive thing or that definitive thing. That's what we're working on. We've only started recording the data in this manner since 2014. This is the first year, by the way. We started, so now in the Spanish program, when they enter into the 300 level and they declare as majors or minors, we do an OPI with them then. And the understanding is then that they would take 2 more years working in upper division advanced level classes, maybe study abroad, and take the OPI again when they exit. It actually might not, right? And we have, in Idaho too, a lot of our students do missions for 2 years, and they also are
all these levels, and Shirley made a good point where they're in the same zone, they're in your classroom, and they can perform at a higher level. But once you take them out of that same zone, they tend to be at a lower level.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so they're, okay. Can we say that, can you ask me that question in Q&A at the end?
Yes.
Because that will make more sense going forward the presentation. Hold on to that question, it's really important. Yeah.
Can I just ask, on your staff here, you're 52% for teacher candidates.
Yeah.
So we're looking at teacher candidates who are 4-year language majors. I'm just really curious in the room how many of us are actually majors of the language that we teach.
So that's a different thing. If you're a native speaker and let's say you got your degrees in science, but you got your endorsement in teaching science in tandem with your language, then that's fine. I'm sure that you have the pedagogical resources at your disposal to be able to teach that language. I think what we're concerned in, and this is something where Elvira Splendor is really working heavily, is to ensure that the teachers that go out into schools are at the level appropriate to scaffold. It's common knowledge, right? It makes sense that we would want the input from a teacher at the level, a couple levels above the proficiency that we're trying to scaffold our students in, right? So I think that that's the concern, and that's what they're looking at and making sure. So there, again, 21 states, Idaho isn't one of them, but they use the OPI. It's an expensive test. It takes a lot of time. So I can understand that there are some issues at play there with being able to implement it. But this number from our students in our Spanish program makes me feel confident that we could implement that and have success in our state. And that might be a really good standard to let students know that they need to work towards this if they want to be excellent teachers. This isn't to be something to threaten them. It's to give them actually more power and to empower them for that. So this is the last and final part of the presentation. This is a part where I hope it's practical and we can look at some nitty-gritty ways to get them moving toward that proficiency. How can we transform assessment so that they're consistent with our classroom practice? To prepare for an assessment, language learners need to practice the language functions, structures, and vocabulary that they will apply on assessment tasks, rather than practicing and memorizing exactly what will be on the assessment. This is a huge frustration, and all of us that teach know this. Students, and they memorize vocabulary, it goes in one ear and out the other as soon as they're done with their exam. They're not recycling vocabulary, they're not learning for the good of learning, right? So how can we make assessments that encourage them to use the vocabulary and the grammar in a real way, but that's not prescribed? That tells them that they're going to need that vocabulary in any given task, any assessment. You don't know when, so you need to learn it for learning's sake, right? Beyond just doing well on a fill-in-the-blank exam. My question for you is, do you think your students know what's expected of them? I think we do a good job of telling them this is going to be on the exam, you need to memorize this part on this page, get this vocabulary, do this grammar. I think we do that because they're hysterical about their grades. I think the thing that, and this is something that I'm not preaching to you from a place of I've done this all of my life. This is something that every semester I get better at, and I'm still getting better at, is making those proficiency guidelines explicit for my learners. She was an advanced low speaker, and she could do an hour of speaking with another student. She was proud of that artifact. I think the actual can-do statements can be a really, really helpful guide. They're in your Dropbox folder. Essentially, what they do is they give you can-do statements for these 4 skills. And they do it for these 3 modes, at the interpersonal, interpretive, and presentational mode. These are all things that are expected according to our national and Idaho state standards. And they do it and they divide it according to the sub-levels. This document is massive and it's incredible, and it looks something like this. You can go to, this is the interpersonal mode. Okay, this is for speaking, so speaking skill, the skill of speaking at the interpersonal mode, at the sub-level for intermediate mid. And it tells you exactly what the global tasks are. There's no reason why we can't adjust these with the vocabulary and the content that's going on in our classroom at present to give them a task and an assessment that aligns with what's expected of them. And I think technology can support powerful conscientiousness building assessments. And the reason technology is so small here is for a purpose, is to illustrate that I'm not about using technology because it's sexy. That is not what we're about. If you've taken a workshop with Amber, it's something we consistently have to dispel, is that technology should not be out in front. It should actually be secondary to what the goal of the technology is. And I think technology can serve in doing this. And let me give you an example. So let's look at a writing proficiency test. And this took me about 45 minutes to design. It took a little time. I'm not asking you to do this every chapter. I'm asking you to start out small. In the next 3 months, do one of these. Try it out. Okay? So I'm going to show you, first I'm going to show you, it's in the Dropbox folder, but I'm going to show you what the assessment looks like. And then I'll show you the product. Sound good? Yes. All right. So, where is that shared Dropbox folder? Is it? Oh, I'm looking at it right now. Okay. All right. So it's the writing assessment example. It's going to pull up right now. This is for you. I put it up there in Pages and in Word documents so you can manipulate it. All right. So, Amber, do you mind actually moving this along as I talk? Thank you. So, if the mode is presentational writing, and my level expectation for them is intermediate, low, mid, I'm going to tell them, I like giving our students autonomy to select a topic that matters to them. I think that when it can happen, it's optimal, right? There's more buy-in. The technology suggestion, I try to give them options so that they don't have to use one. There can always be the option to not use technology, and I can tell you how you can dumb this down, if you will, so they don't have to actually use a device. Pre-task. I think pre-task is really important. You might tell students that your goal for this assignment is to meet the intermediate low benchmark for presentational writing. This is the minimum, although you may challenge yourself by selecting a topic outlined in the next level. So that's where you're foreshadowing where they can go. And you're telling them, I expect you to meet this level, but if you want to challenge yourself, you can go there. And you'll be surprised at what they'll choose. Notice the main difference between the levels is using a series of simple sentence versus connected sentences. So highlighting what's the key characteristic difference here. That's getting you to the next level. Pick the level where you feel comfortable. You will not get a better grade for choosing a harder level. Rather, you will be evaluated based on your success on meeting the goals of the task. So if you go down a little bit, I would provide this in a better form. I would show them what the can-do statements are for both intermediate low and intermediate mid. And this is something that ACTFL gives you. You could put it right there. So go down a little bit. I would give time for self-assessment, self-reflection. If you're teaching in high school, I think it's okay for them to reflect in English. If you're teaching at the advanced level, they can do that in the target language. There's no problem. Ask students to select the topics that they think they can handle at each level. They should reflect on the boxes they've selected and explain how they'd like to improve based on what isn't checked. So that's their goal. That's the thing that they want to try to meet over the long haul. They should select a topic for the select a topic for the project that isn't checked. So that's the challenge there. And keep in mind, self-assessments are often inflated, okay? So you might, that's where you as the teacher can say, okay, I see that you think that you dominate this, but actually there's a little work here. So that's your role, okay? So scaffold maybe a reality check for some of them. The part B could be exploration. That's the fun part where they can search on the web, textbook for authentic examples that align to the project, the task they're giving, that you're giving them. So you'll see here, this is an idea, and I'll show you. Based on the task they've selected, they can choose Adobe Slate, and then they align that to the can-do statement and the standards. And then there's a post-task reflection, but let me show you here. So going back to Keynote, if you can find that. So if I go here, and this should take me actually to the web page. Does it? Just it's pulling up down there. Yeah, my trip to Spain. I did this with Adobe Slate. Really easy to do. This is where the technology doesn't get in the way. It's my 3-year-old probably, he couldn't write obviously, but he could probably navigate and drop it. I mean, you think I'm kidding. It's scary how he could probably mess around with it enough that it's so easy. So if you scroll down, Amber, for me, thank you. So my trip to Spain. This is where I could write an introduction to my trip. I went to Spain, or I'm going to Spain. Talk about a fictitious trip. I could label things in the picture to make this more targeted to novice level. So if it was for the novice level, you're looking for keywords, concrete words, puente, right? Fridge, tower, etc., etc. I might explain that every day on my trip, I like to run across the bridge and along the river. That's where you could involve aspect, right? You can involve different times. Nice pictures. By the way, these are not my pictures. Adobe Slate has a thing that says search for images. I put in there Salamanca Bridge, and it pulled this up, and I dragged and dropped it. It was seamless. It was so easy. You can obviously use your pictures if you have them. I could try and connect sentences about food I ate on my trip. That would be the jump to the next level, okay? And so these are, again, pictures I robbed off the internet that are free to use. I put in there. I could label food vocabulary. This is one example where the technology doesn't get in the way, and it really supports students to think creatively and use the language for real purposes. And they're connecting that with visual things that are culturally relevant, right? Okay, so let's look at, let's look at oral proficiency. And I'm just about to finish up, I know, thank you. Okay, so just to show you the same thing, can you go back to the Dropbox folder actually? This same idea is, and it's the oral, it should be the presentational speaking center. The same thing is provided for you at the advanced level. Those of you that teach AAP, you could try this, although AP, your students probably are still at intermediate, low, intermediate, mid levels. At college, this could definitely be the case. Sorry, it's highlighting everything because in Pages I have a Spanish keyword. But the same thing here. I do these activities in my class called Making It Personal, where I ask them to do the reading and find a couple key concepts that for them stood out. And they have to define it to me in their own words and make it personal, associate it with a real life application. They have to do that all in the target language, so it's real high level advanced, but something that's expected for them at the proficiency level. So same kind of idea, there would be a pre, there would be the task, and there would be a post reflection, all aligning to what's expected them for that proficiency guideline. Back to Keynote for me. I'll show you an example from one of my students that did this. Did a nice example. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be, oh sorry, it's that one, yeah. And this is using Adobe Voice. I don't work for Adobe, I promise. They're just really great, great tools.
Hola, soy Chris Moonwright. Quiero explicar un poco sobre las zonas diferentes.
This didn't take him a long time. These are just pictures. He's talking about the difference in Latin America between what we call the high ground or the high levels, and then what would be the low levels. So the coastal varieties in Latin America and how they have certain characteristics that contrast with the interior. And so he's using simple images. What's great about Adobe Voice is it stops you from going beyond 30 seconds. So you have to organize your thoughts, which again is a key marker of advanced level proficiency, right? Being able to speak in connected ways. Just has some, this isn't fancy, but what is it getting him to do? Organize his thoughts and use the language in a way that it's not fill in the blank and memorize. All right, so go back to the presentation, and when it's all finished. My question to you, or I guess my take-home message, is that sometimes language feels like it's a mix, right? We don't know, students don't know where they're going. They feel like they take a couple steps forward, only just take a couple steps back. I think we need a pathway that's built on research, science, years of strong pedagogical practice that is constantly being renewed, re-examined, and re-evaluated. We need more than just a vision, and I think ACTFL provides just more than a vision and more than just standards. I think they provide the pathways so that what we can project to students is a clear pathway moving towards improved proficiency, all right? So that means meaningful communication, mirroring real-world language use. For the teacher, it means being able to scaffold appropriate L2 growth and being strategic in our assessments. Gracias. Questions?